And we welcome you in, everyone, to another edition of our Linux on Baseball live stream podcast. Glad you're with us. Already this week, we've talked with Travis Chalk from Baseballism, the athletic apparel company that is all things baseball. If you don't know about Baseballism, we're telling you about it again today. Encourage you to go back to Tuesday's interview with Travis. And yesterday we talked with the Baron, Larry Shank. Those both available on our Linux on Baseball Facebook page, as well as our YouTube page. And you can follow us on Twitter at Linux on Baseball. Absolute pleasure to welcome in today Dan Loney. Dan and I have known each other for many years. A couple occasions we crossed paths when he was in the Eastern League. And I was in the Carolina League. He was in Trenton. I was in Wilmington. And, Dan, first off, thanks so much for taking a couple of minutes with us. And as we kind of come in here, what I've always loved about being in the minors for as many years as I was the fact that, there are guys I've never met. And you and I, like I said, we've only crossed paths a couple of times. But I feel like when we start a conversation up again, it's like we talked 5 or 6 days ago.
Yeah, it is kind of funny that way. And broadcasting in the minor leagues, we were kind of a fraternity, and our goal was the same thing. We all wanted to try and get up to the major leagues or get a great gig. Some of us have had a great opportunity, like with ESPN. I'm not naming any names, but but the funny thing is, we're all trying to get to the same spot, but I think we're all supportive of one another, especially when that person got to that spot. And that was kind of one of the fun things about baseball. The other thing for me, I did 13 years in the minor leagues, and I still have conversations with players that I had on my teams,
Right.
through Facebook. I stay in touch with people, and it's just a fraternity, like unlike a lot of jobs where it's such a unique job, and you have the understanding of how many challenges you have in broadcasting baseball, just like you do in playing baseball.
And the big league guys, we'll touch on it a little bit later on. The big league guys are kind of getting an idea of what it was like. Pretty much broadcast in front of nobody in a ballpark, although their ballpark's a lot bigger than the ones that we did. Dan is now hosting the Wharton Business Daily on Sirius XM channel 132. He's been doing that. What now? You're now in your 6th year?
Yeah, we're in our 6th year. It basically started out as an idea by the head of Sirius XM at that time, Scott Greenstein, who at the time had a son that was going to the Wharton School, and he was looking for something other than Sirius XM at that point. The only business news that they had on there was the audio from CNBC and Bloomberg, and so he was looking for something more live, more direct to the listener. And so, as I said, he had a son going to Wharton at the time. He pitched the idea to Wharton. Wharton liked it. And so we've been doing the show now for 6 years. Obviously, the last few months, I've been doing it from my house. You see my trees in my backyard in the suburbs of Philadelphia. It's been a great experience because I'm able to tap into a lot of the experts at Wharton and talk about the things that I think people are passionate about. And for me, I'm always been passionate about the sports, but also the business of sport. And we do some of that as well. And in this day and age, especially with COVID and sports having shut down and the impact that both major league and minor league sports are feeling, I think it's a very important topic.
As we get into those topics, I've been welcoming guests in, and the first thing I ask them is it kind of tells part of your story, and having the baseball background that you do. Give us an idea. How old were you? Who introduced you to the game of baseball, and when did that sort of flirtation process begin that you really enjoyed the game?
It's funny because I would bet a lot of people would say that their dad got them into understanding baseball. Mine is different, that it was actually my mom. My dad wasn't a big baseball fan. And ironically, my best friend growing up, his mom was also a big baseball fan, and his dad was not. So it was our moms that used to take us to Phillies games back in the mid 70s, back when Mike Schmidt was just starting to, become a name, and Larry Boa and those guys. When we would go to the Vet back in the day and go watch the Phillies when they weren't such a great team, and that got me into my love of baseball. And then, ironically enough, when I graduated college at Temple, my first job out of college was for 12:10 a.m. in Philadelphia, which was the old WCAU, which carried the Phillies games. And after about a year of doing various shows, they came to me and said, "Hey, listen, we'd like you to produce the Phillies games at the Vet." And that meant working with Harry Callis and Richie Ashburn and Andy Musser and Chris Wheeler. And I was just absolutely in awe of being able to do that. And so that's what kind of got me wanting to do baseball broadcasting as a profession. And so I've been hooked for a long time, but now I'm even more so hooked because of having been in baseball and knowing people and seeing what the business is like, and obviously what the business is going through right now.
Great. I love it. And again, it tells part of your story, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. I had the Baron on, Larry Shank, yesterday,
Yeah.
and we just went through some Phillies history.
Yeah.
I didn't get to this one with him, but you brought up Harry Callis, and it's one of those where you remember where you were, and whatever it was for me,
Oh,
I
yeah.
was actually selling cars in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Nationals home opener in 2008. Where were you on that day?
I believe at that time I was working at the Wall Street Journal, and
Okay.
uh, I remember hearing about his passing. And Harry and I actually had a pretty good working relationship. Obviously, I was in the booth for a couple of years producing their games, but my best Harry story was when I went to work for Lakewood, which was the Phillies single A affiliate in the South Atlantic League. The Phillies do a winter caravan, and they came down and were doing an appearance there, and they were doing a signing, autograph signing at a local mall there. And I walked up and I figured, Harry's not going to remember me. No way. And I walk up to him and he looks at me and it takes like 5 seconds. He goes, "Dan, great to see you. Oh my God, how you been?" In that unmistakable Harry voice. And it was,
Yep.
he always cared about the people that he worked with. And he is one of the nicest people I've ever had the opportunity to work with. I was very lucky that all four of those guys were phenomenal. Richie would try and bust my stones from time to time, and it was just great to see the play, the interaction between all of those four gentlemen in the booth. And Larry Shank the Baron was the PR director, and he was always so
Right.
kind to me, and still is when I trade messages with him on Facebook. So it was just an unbelievable experience for a kid who grew up in Philadelphia to have a couple of years working in the booth, and then to be able to to see Harry years later and still have him remember me and be able to talk baseball with him.
So, hitting a variety of topics here, and starting, both as we already stated, our backgrounds in minor league baseball certainly have an affinity from where we come from, and like you said, almost a fraternity with minor league broadcasters. I feel like right now, and you're going to explain this to me like I'm a 6-year-old, because I think I can sort of gloss over a lot of issues between Major League Baseball and minor league baseball.
Yeah.
Of in-depth knowledge of it, maybe the way I did, 5-10 years ago. It seems like with the coronavirus, Major League Baseball can absolutely take advantage of exactly what they want to do, because some of these minor league franchises are going to fall to the wayside because they're just not going to be able to operate when green light comes again, where the curtain goes up and they're ready to go.
Yeah, the business model is obviously going to change, and the relationship, for people that don't know, you have minor league owners that actually own the team, and they sell the billboards in the outfield, and they sell the programs, and they sell the tickets. But obviously, the major league team provides the players; they pay their insurance, they take care of some of the expenses. But minor league owners still have to pay for the bus to get the team around, and they pay for a portion of the bats. And there's this whole dynamic. It's a great business when it's running 100%, but obviously this year it's not. And then you have to throw in this story that potentially minor league baseball wants to contract by about 40 teams. And I feel really bad for some of the owners of teams that are not going to have franchises anymore, and have an expectation of what value is of a franchise, whether it be $1 million, $3 million, $5 million, of having that local business. but they're going to go away, and there's really nothing they've done that has hurt that business. They have been impacted by the coronavirus, but also this decision that Major League Baseball wants to cut back on the number of teams. And certainly baseball can do that. It's their operation. But still, there's also going to be a significant loss at the local level. Then you throw in the fact that some of these towns, you really count on that 35 to 70 nights of entertainment every year as a component to your community. That's going to be gone. Then you have to think about the jobs that you and I had coming out of college, wanting to be in baseball. There's so many people that go to the baseball winter meetings not because to see all the free agents that sign, but because there's a job fair there, and those people are going to have fewer opportunities. So I love minor league baseball, but I feel like it is in such a transition, and in many cases, it's a transition that's going to be for the worse overall for the overall operation of what minor league baseball is.
If Major League Baseball implements its plan going forward, and they lop off 40 franchises, if that's what's ultimately negotiated, is there any part of you that can see down the road that the glass is half full, that this idea that they have can work out in the long term?
Well, it's going to work out for baseball because, again, as you kind of alluded to, they hold a lot of the cards here. The other side of it is that it doesn't give, a percentage of players coming out of college who would normally be drafted, because I can see it very easily being cut to a 15-round draft, and then you sign players as free agents. That it's going to be a very different dynamic. So again, I understand from the major league side, it's their business. They feel like they don't need to draft as many players because the percentage of players that make it to the major league is a relatively low number. But you every once in a while, and Mike Piazza is maybe the greatest example of it, a kid that was drafted as an afterthought by the Dodgers as a favor between Tommy Lasorda and his dad, Vince, who's a car dealer here in the Philadelphia area. And he went from a 62nd round draft pick to a Hall of Famer. And those are the stories that still pop up through baseball. And I don't think you're going to have those anymore.
In terms of what baseball wants to do, and are there parallels with the fact that we know you have to have a roster of 25, day in, day out, you have to have that roster. So we talk about those guys at the end of the you were in Double-A with the Trenton club. Was that the Yankees the whole time you were there?
No, we were Red Sox the first couple of years, and then we switched over to Yankees.
Okay. So, you've got those guys at the end of the bench, the guys that's playing, the third string catcher, he might play on Sunday and he might DH in the middle of the week, but you still have to have those rosters. So, minor league and certain groups clamoring for, hey, we need a living wage. We need to make more money. We need to have, maybe your 12-month a year insurance, things like that.
Yeah.
It seems like, baseball might be willing to do that. Yeah. But ultimately those guys maybe who are clamoring for that, they're not going to be on these rosters because now you're not carrying 6 and 7 minor league affiliates.
Correct. And and from a financial perspective, it is going to be a benefit to baseball. But remember, baseball is a billion-dollar business, as it is already, multi-billion-dollar. And obviously they are, paying very high salaries at the major league level. And this is, something that I know has been a big issue at the minor league level of a lot of players that are coming up through systems. I mean, sure, you have the guys that were drafted high to get the bonus money and they can stock that away. But for the guys that were the 20th round draft pick, they're not getting a big bonus and they're living on a few $100s a month during the season. They're not even getting paid, during the off season. And it's a hard life. I mean, you've probably seen it. I know I've seen it. In the minor leagues, you sometimes get 6 guys that are living in an apartment so that you can split it up. So you're only spending $150 or $200 a month on your rent. And then you have to factor in the food and everything. It's a very tough prospect for minor league baseball players to be able to continue to do this career and hope you can do it for, 10, 12 years in the minor leagues without having to say, maybe I need to pack it up and go. I love the game, but there are some dynamics about the business side of it that really should be looked at a lot deeper.
In terms of, I go back my final year in minor league baseball. I'd never give the guy up, but sitting behind me on the bus, and not only were they getting their per diem, which wasn't a lot of money,
Yeah.
but they were getting their paychecks. And this guy, I think he was probably a fifth rounder. So those top 5 round guys. He was a third year college guy, and he opened up his check, and I just happened to be looking in the wrong spot the wrong time, and I saw the number on it. And I'm like, wow, that's double my salary. And I've been in this business for a handful of years. And not that I became jaded over it, but before I even really got to think about looking at that check, the hitting coach or one of the coaches said, "What are you doing?" to the player. And very matter-of-factly said, "You don't do that here."
Yeah.
Because I saw it as the broadcaster. The guy behind him could have been that guy, $1,000 and a plane ticket. And basically saying, you do that on your own time. You don't do that on the bus. And, those guys are different. You got such a different, you can go through the entire bus and say, okay, he's got a little bit of money. But if you look at a guy like he's struggling.
Yeah. And that's, I think, part of just kind of being in baseball. And that's kind of the hierarchy that's kind of been in place. But he's right. And you may very well be have been drafted in the first round, second round, and gotten a good sized check, but you don't want to flaunt it in front of other players because as you said, it's the pay dynamics, and I think maybe even more so at the higher levels, especially when you have guys that might be on a split contract that are coming down from the major leagues at AAA. They're getting paid a hell of a lot more than a guy that just came up from AA and is trying to work his way through the system. I would like to see if there's a way that, and I know there are a couple former players who are lawyers that are trying to work on this, is if we can get a significant raise in the pay, especially at the lower levels of minor league baseball. And look, if you don't want to pay them during the offseason because they're not necessarily working out your facility, okay, I understand that. But that time during the season, you should be giving them, a living wage, so that they don't have to go to the grocery store when you're on a 10-day road trip and grab a loaf of bread and a pack of ham and some cheese, and that's their lunch for the next 7 days.
At what point, and I'm a little bit surprised that it hasn't happened, and maybe it has, I just haven't seen the articles, but is there a conflict of interest with MLB owners that own minor franchises? Because we know they're not going to be on the chopping block.
Yeah, I would say that there probably is, but I think that's the expectation of what the business has become in the last few years. And, I think of the Phillies organization in the fact that they have a percentage ownership, I believe, in Lakewood. They obviously have a strong percentage ownership with the AAA team in Lehigh Valley. It may be, but then again, the dynamics of the business are the expectation is the major league teams want to have more control because they want to make sure that their players are being taken care of and their training is being done properly and they're moving up through the system. It's one thing to have the on the field stuff, but you still have to take care of them in the off the field setting. And I think at times there's just not enough of that thought process about all of the players that a team may have drafted. And there's and look, it probably is the case that players that get drafted higher are going to be thought of more than a guy that gets drafted in the 20th or 30th round. Still doesn't mean that they don't have the chance to make it and be a valuable entity in your system.
When you look down the road, I mean, baseball, black guy here, black guy there, takes a shot to the ribs, and everyone wants to always pile on. And a lot of the times it's the same arguments. But this, to me, seems like it's headed for the court systems at some point. Maybe it's arbitration with the individual owners. But how would that process sort of carry out between the two sides? Is we hear that they're going to continue negotiating here in the coming weeks, and the contract between the two sides, time is running out.
Well, and I think from what I'm hearing in a couple of different sources, I think within the owners of minor league baseball teams, that there's a little bit of a divide right now in terms of the path that the minor league baseball office would like to go and what the owners would like to go. And I think it goes back in part to what you were just saying with having major league clubs having a certain level of ownership of minor league teams. Uh, I have a feeling that in the end, that Major League Baseball is going to take over minor league baseball, and I think they are going to end up running it more from a full perspective. You may have ownership of teams by individuals at the local level, maybe at the double A level, maybe at the single A level. But I think at some point I can see all of the triple A teams being owned by Major League Baseball franchises, just because they seemingly want to be on a path where they have more control of what is going on in the day-to-day operation, especially at the minor leagues. They talked about the stadiums a lot. Well, I mean, you've seen it, I've seen it. A majority of the stadiums in minor league baseball are very, very good facilities. They have great fields, they have great stadiums, they have really good hitting facilities underneath the stadiums. The locker rooms have come a long way. I mean, this is not Bull Durham anymore. It may be for a couple of places.
Right.
So I don't buy that. I don't buy that excuse that part of this is because the stadiums are so poor.
So how does stadium debt get paid down going forward? In cities that for one reason or another, they're on the hook. I mean, you look up at Worcester, Massachusetts, and they're building a new ballpark. A lot of these aren't privately financed. They're, the towns and the
Right.
cities are involved, and the debt service is decades out. So how does that,
Yep.
where does that end? How does that enter into it?
Well, I think where it comes from is that it's important for the people in these local communities to understand truly what is going on. It is just like the financing for a major league stadium, although probably at a lower level. But still, it is money that is going to come back and end up being somehow on the bottom line of the taxpayer. And you mentioned Worcester when they made the announcement that the franchise was going to go from Pawtucket to Worcester. It caught me off guard because I've driven through Worcester, Mass a few times, and it's a great city, but I just didn't see it as a city that was going to be able to hold AAA baseball. That being said, you throw in the Red Sox component of it, Red Sox Nation, and you're probably going to do very well in drawing from not only Worcester but some of those smaller towns around there. So I think they're going to do well. But again, for Worcester, which is a town that, and I'm not sure what the size is, but most people know it for Holy Cross. I hope that it isn't too much of a burden on the community from a financial perspective.
I've tempered my outlash via social media when it comes to the fact that minor league baseball should be ashamed of itself for the fact that they're leaving Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
But in talking to some people over the last couple of months, it seems like the state at least went as far as it could in order to keep the franchise. But, you and I both know, as, minor league guys got big league jobs from Pawtucket. Okay, we want to be in Pawtucket. That's the place to be.
Sure.
I mean, that's a crown jewel. I mean, that's history of minor league baseball. And the fact that, however this lands, even if there is short season or whatever it might be in the future, it's pretty sad that transpired the way it did.
And again, this is a decision that governments, either at the city level or at the state level, have to make. Does the state of Rhode Island, did they want to put in $20 to $30 million to build a new stadium for Pawtucket? Does it work out that investing that money, they will be able to get enough of a return on it in a short enough time? I mean, understand the money is going to be laid out over a 20-year, whatever that number of years is, but you still want to be able to see the right return, the ROI, in a fairly quick fashion. I'm not sure what I think the attendance of Pawtucket is around 10,000, isn't it, Steve?
The numbers have always been high, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, in this day and age of minor league baseball, what is the right size for a AAA stadium? Is it 20,000? Can you expect to have a 25,000 seat baseball stadium that you're going to be able to fill on the majority of nights? Well, that's a question that the team has to figure out, but it's also something that the city or the state has to figure out, because part of that deal is going to be probably parking, some sort of deal on concessions, on ticket tax, on, there are so many different little elements that are at play here. And I assume Rhode Island crunched the numbers and they said, we really just can't do this anymore. And Worcester obviously feels like they can step up and they can do it. Obviously, a little bit larger state and probably a little bit more room to work in terms of potentially financing that stadium.
I go back to our owner in Wilmington, Delaware, Mr. Minker, who passed away several years ago now. Owned the AAA franchise out in Omaha and worked with the College World Series, worked with Warren Buffett. And that stadium for them was great on July 4 because, as you said, the capacity was well over 15,000. But on any given Tuesday or Wednesday, 4,000 didn't look like a whole lot in a 15, 20,000 seat stadium, and ultimately down the road, they end up with 2 new ballparks in that area. That was the amazing thing to see. And I've read a lot of different articles to see how it came about for both parties with the College World Series of the city of Omaha and also the AAA franchise. That one just baffled me, the fact that, ultimately they ended up with 2 ballparks.
Yeah, I'm like you. I was really surprised that ended up being the resolution of that. And I can very well see what he's saying about the fact that and you've been there, and so have I. When you're talking about a Monday night or a Tuesday night or even a Wednesday night in April, when the kids are still in school, that you're just not going to draw that many people. And it is a hard thing for the business of minor league baseball to deal with. And the fact is, you still have to turn the lights on for the entire stadium. It's not like you're just turning the lights on for the 4,000 people that are going to be at that game. So, there are costs that are associated that in many cases you really have to look for ways to be able to gain some of that revenue back.
You earlier this week, speaking of revenue, and you had a Nashville Sounds T-shirt on, and I agree with your point 100%. It's about selling those, that 1 or 2 T-shirts here or there, the hats. The Batavia Muck Dogs are still around, and I was part of that, changing the name, and saw what it did to bring in a little bit more revenue in terms of the merchandising. How long will it take for the franchises that do exist on the other side and survive it to understand just what 2020 did to them? As owners, as franchises, as a big part of local community.
Well, I think they already have understood what's going on because, and I don't have any direct information, but I would venture to guess that a majority of minor league teams have cut staff. They weren't keeping full staffs during the course of the coronavirus because realistically there was a need to. You're probably cutting back on your ticket staff, because you're not selling tickets for this game. You may be starting to sell and think about tickets for sales for 2021, which, by the way, of course, at least as we sit here right now doing this, there's no guarantee that we're going to see fans in the stands in 2021 until we get a virus for this vaccine. And, so there's still so much up in the air. I think that the owners realize it right off the bat. The question is going to be, do they have enough wherewithal to be able to maybe do some things that are more out of the box than they normally would, to be able to drive new revenue streams for 2021. And I think we're starting to see that. And you mentioned before we were talking, Tom McCarthy, who was doing a video series for the Phillies while the coronavirus is going on. Well, that was a sponsored element for the Phillies. I mean, a lot of these teams, and you think about what you see in Major League Baseball right now, of all the digital advertising that is on fields across the major leagues, because some of these teams are trying to, justify contracts that multi-year contracts that they have with different business partners, that they have to show value to that sponsor right now. The sponsor doesn't care about it. The sponsor is more than willing to pull the contract if the major league team or the minor league team is not able to fulfill that contract, and take that money and put it on social media or put it in another venue. By the way, this is a story I've also talked about on my show, on my radio show on Sirius XM, about the marketing of what's going on right now. Marketing is a vastly different avenue just in general right now because of the coronavirus.
And we talked about that franchise up in Worcester, by the way. I didn't read the article. You know, we read headlines nowadays, and if it really piques our interest, then we'll click on the article, of course. 9 different jersey tops that they're going to have.
Yeah.
Now. And I think 5 or 6 different hats. Good luck to the clubbies trying to figure that stuff out on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, that I saw that too, and obviously part of that is the marketing and trying to sell the swag to the fans. That's even crazier than the old Pittsburgh Pirates, you know, back in the 70s when they had multiple uniforms and the stovetop hats as well. Look, you know, teams have to find ways to try and push revenue. You mentioned I was wearing a Nashville Sound shirt earlier this week, and a friend of mine and we both have been buying items from minor league teams just to support them. And I'm trying to get the hashtag support MILB going right now, because if you can have 1,000 people or 2,000 people each buy a shirt or each buy a hat right now, that's a huge thing for a minor league baseball team right now. I mean, in the scope of having 7,000 people at a game on a fireworks night in July, it's pretty small. But if you can do your part right now, I think it becomes very valuable. And we're in an avenue where the more options you give the consumer, the better off it's going to be for you down the road.
Have you been surprised? You know, we always, the phrase affordable family entertainment. And, I've watched what's gone on in Hartford with the Yard Goats, and to the outside, it looks very successful. And I think they have been. They've had great crowds. They've had tremendous response for the downtown ballpark in Hartford. Now I'm curious to see what the next 5 years are, because they, like a lot of other franchises, they've promised, we're going to bring businesses around this area. It's going to be a hustle bustle area, and I'm always I'm always sort of skeptical on that. But with minor league baseball, the affordable family entertainment side of it, to me, it's sort of north of affordable family entertainment these days. I mean, it's still it's a pretty good penny. I'm going, the way I look at it now is, when I used to get, when I was in Staten Island, and I'd go to a Met game as a fan, or a Knick game, I got tickets. So okay, now I'm willing to go spend a couple extra dollars on the beers and some food and stuff like that. If I was paying for my own ticket, I brought that peanut butter and jelly sandwich just about. My food budget was very small, but they're starting to get higher and higher with prices, and it's probably going to be a part of it in the future too. Not that they can hit a home run with every sale and every ticket sold and every hot dog sold, but the prices realistically are going to go up in the future for franchises across the board.
I think you're exactly right. And I've noticed it as well. And it's been a little bit of what they call in the business world, the creep. I mean, we've seen pricing at the major league level creep higher over the last few years. I went to a game at Yankee Stadium last year, and parking was $45. And I was like, are you kidding me? That's but what was funny was the large soda at Yankee Stadium was like $9, and that was I thought a great value. When I take my kids to go to a Phillies game, or even to the Philadelphia Union, which is the MLS soccer team in our area, the one thing I buy is the pint of ice cream, because it's like $6, and I can my 3 kids sharing it, and it's the best value in the ballpark. So the dynamics of the business are changing. But then again, I think the expectation of the consumer is changing. And for many people, I think they understand that they may be able to pay a little bit more for a hot dog, a little bit more for a soda, just as long as it doesn't get too far out of control.
Get your two thoughts on 2 more. I brought up this topic a few weeks ago. Tim, who's now at The Athletic, used to be at MLB.com with me. Will Major League Baseball try to hit a home run and bring back some of the lost revenue from 2020 by bringing expansion and maybe 2 new franchises sooner rather than later?
It may very well be an option. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull that off right now. I had a chance to interview Dave Buck on my radio show, who's with the Phillies, and I've been asking different CEOs of sports franchises the last couple of months, and whether or not there's a way to recoup some of this revenue that's lost because of the coronavirus. And pretty much to a person, they're all understanding that whatever is lost here in 2020 is gone. There's really no way to pull it back. Would baseball go ahead and do that? Yeah, I wouldn't surprise me one bit if they think that they can sell 2 more franchises at a max value in markets that would be good spots. And then there's the question of what the markets would be. And would Portland, Oregon be a market for that? Well, we've seen baseball there in the past. What are we going to see? Is Las Vegas going to be a spot that we see Major League Baseball in, especially since we see the NFL there now and hockey is there? I think there are markets for baseball to still explore. And so they don't have to worry about the other sports realistically. They can get along with them. So, yeah, why wouldn't they do it?
The Mets are on the block. What happens here in the coming months with the franchise in Queens?
Well, I think a lot of people that watch Sunday Night Baseball would hope that A-Rod gets it, because I know a lot of people would like to see him off of Sunday Night Baseball. This has been a franchise that obviously, since the whole thing with Bernie Madoff and the Wilpons investing with them, has obviously been an absolute disaster for that franchise. They've had to cut back left, right, and center. I would assume right now, since it seems like that he's the lead dog in the race right now, that A-Rod will be part of the ownership group. And obviously, Alex is doing a lot of things outside of broadcasting for ESPN, a lot of investments. I know he's involved in trying to build out real estate with actually a Wharton School grad down in the Miami area. So he's very much become an expanded businessman. And obviously, I think he has a lot of connections in and around New York City and Wall Street that he can put together an ownership group. The question would be, is he the president of the team, kind of like Jeter is down in Miami? We'll wait and see.
With the Mets sale, and it'll be determined whether or not SNY is a part of it. But as I touched on earlier, with minor league teams of trying to get a new ballpark in a town or a city, it's what we can build up around it. That area around Citi Field at some point, I think the Wilpons sort of have had an idea, and I mean they're in the real estate industry as well, that is prime real estate for the future. Do you see it that way? And is that as big a part of the puzzle as just owning the Mets franchise as is?
Anytime, Steve, that I hear an ownership group say, we've got a plan to develop the property around the stadium, I immediately turn away. I never believe it. And I use the example from here in Philadelphia of the Philadelphia Union. The Major League Soccer franchise has a stadium. It's not in the city. It's in the suburbs. It's along the Delaware River, south of the city. And they said when they were building up that stadium that, yes, they were going to be developing the area around it. Well, the franchise is 10 years in, and there has been nothing developed around it. And it's in a city, Chester, which is a town which is economically struggling in many fronts. And so it's great that they put that out. It's great that they say it. But until I see a shovel in the ground and bricks starting to go up, I have no faith that any owner wants to develop anything other than getting that stadium done.
No, we went a lot of different directions here. You shared a lot of wonderful insight all the way throughout the process here. So with that, didn't touch on anything. I want to give you the last word with baseball as you see it going forward. And I'll put the carrot out there that we do have a vaccine in 2021. As soon as the calendar turns, we're looking at better days ahead. So when it comes to baseball, what do you see?
So I'm going to take this from the minor league perspective, since that's my bailiwick and yours as well. Look, people, minor league, and I said this on Twitter a couple of days ago. Minor league baseball teams suffered significantly this year. Major league teams did as well. Minor league teams really did. So assuming we get a vaccine, really, if you are a baseball fan, you need to go out and support a minor league team in your area. Right now, if you can buy a shirt or buy a hat and help out a team, even $25 buying a shirt or a hat, do it right now, because these are small businesses for the most part in communities around the country, in smaller cities, that you don't want to lose because they're great entertainment options. 70 nights a year for a full season team at home, 35 nights for a short season team at home. Support them. Be there. Help them out as much as you can, because you know what? those teams and those front office franchises, they're looking to support their local communities as well. And I really hope that 2021 ends up being a great year for baseball all the way around.
Well said. Appreciate taking the time. Great seeing you, and we'll catch up down the road. Best to you and the family.
Steve, as always, great to talk to you. I think you're doing a great job with this. Keep it up, and I'll talk to you on Twitter.
Sounds good. Dan Loney, longtime broadcaster in the minor leagues, 13 years. We don't really revisit and go back and forth all the time in terms of resetting the guests like you would on a radio show, because I put the lower third in there about the different guests we have. But Dan gave some great stuff there. Again, he hosts the show Wharton Business Daily on Sirius XM 132. He's now in his 6th year doing that. We wrap up this week. We're going to try to put something together, maybe for Friday, something a little bit different, just going outside the box. And then next week, hopefully tomorrow, if we do go live for a short time, we can line up the guests that we have for next week as well. Appreciate, as always, you checking in with us at Lennox on Baseball on Twitter, and follow us on our Facebook page at Lennox on Baseball and our YouTube channel as well. Always appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will talk soon.